Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us this morning as we talk about environmental, social, and corporate and governance. My name is Grace Mboko from CAM Secretariat. So we are joined by our panel of great speakers who are going to share insights on this topic. Just allow me to recognize the guests here with us. So we have CAM Women in Manufacturing Chair, that's Ms. Miringechu, Kenya Green Building Society CEO and ESG Lead, Ms. Nasra Nanda, BAT Head of Corporate Affairs, Ms. Mimi Mavuti, Nairobi Securities Exchange Senior Officer, Corporate Affairs and Investor Relations, Ms. Wendy Boyd, Vince Plastics Business Development Manager, Ms. Sarah Njau, CAM Head of Consulting and Business Development, Ms. Joyce Njogu, our members present. So feel free to share the questions that you may have for our speakers through the Q&A and comment sections. We'll have a Q&A session thereafter where we'll respond to most of your questions, if not all. So to kick us off, I'd like to welcome our Head of Consulting and Business Development, Ms. Joyce Njogu, to give her remarks. Karibu sana, Joyce.
Thank you, Grace. Welcome this morning to this wonderful webinar. I wish to recognize our chair, Kenya in CAM, Women in Manufacturing Caucus, Ms. Miringechu. I also wish to recognize the CEO and ESG lead, Ms. Nasra Nanda from Kenya Green Building Society, Ms. Mimi Mavuti, BAT Head of Corporate Affairs, welcome. Also, Ms. Wendy Boyd, Senior Officer, Corporate Affairs and Investor Relations, Nairobi Securities Exchange. Also wish to welcome Sarah Njau from Vince Plastics Limited, the Business Development Manager, who has also joined us, and all the members present. Welcome this morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are so glad to have our first WIM-led ESG forum, and quite a wonderful morning to have all of you. So it's a great pleasure because this morning we are getting into a very critical conversation that incorporates ESG practices in the business. And we are looking at all the issues that have come up, starting with the call from the Secretary General, the 8th United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, who said, saving our planet, lifting people out of poverty and advancing economic growth are one and the same fight. I wish to repeat that. Saving our planet, which is whether it's environmental issues or social issues, lifting people out of poverty and advancing economic growth are one and the same fight. So that's the basis of our discussion today. And as CAM, our aspiration is to advocate for an enabling business environment that will help the sector to thrive, manufacturing sector, as well as eradicating poverty by how we drive sustainable, inclusive economic, social development. We cannot speak of Kenya's socio-economic development without attributing it to very many transformative initiatives that have a positive impact in the society. A lot is happening, and these sessions is to hear from our speakers on what they're doing on the ground as we rally each other to do more and have a strategic approach towards that. At CAM, we launched a new environmental, social, and governance arm called Ukamilifu. Ukamilifu now houses the social impact efforts and initiatives that bolster the mandate and that of local industry in driving economic growth and consequently bridging inequality. It is an initiative that we use to demonstrate CAM's wider role in shared prosperity, poverty alleviation, and bridging inequality. Within Ukamilifu, we have 4 pillars. One is a green world, an industry that seeks to restore and replenish the environment in the way we approach our business practices, and specifically responsible consumption and production. A futuristic world is our second pillar, creating a difference in the future of work and access to technology. Our third pillar is an inclusive world, achieving our economic goals by embracing diversity. Our fourth pillar within Ukamilifu is a sustainable world, bringing in more young people to share in industry's vision through the innovations and full participation in economic activities. Some of the initiatives that we have to support community work and empowering the marginalized in our society, promoting economic and environmentally sustainable practices include our mentorship program for young people, the youth in low-income areas who are involved in various community development programs, such as protecting the environment. We also engage with disadvantaged youth and children in various homes, where we interact with them and provide essentials critical for their survival. As an association, we also promote skills development for vulnerable populations in partnership with the International Labour Organization, where we provided training opportunities to young people in refugee camps and also surrounding host communities to increase their employability in the local industries around them. We have equipped women and persons with disabilities in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda who own enterprises with skills to grow and expand their business. This was in partnership with the East African Women in Business Platform and GIZ, Creating Business Perspectives. We also partnered with Mathari National Teaching and Referral Hospital to raise awareness on mental health. You realize mental health had become quite a big issue, especially emphasized during COVID period. But then we have had so many programs to build on the awareness around that and opportunities to avoid the challenges around mental issues. Every year through the Sustainable Week, we engage young people on matters conserving the environment and circular economy. We also partner with government on afforestation and reforestation together with our members, the manufacturers. And we are currently working with the Ministry of Environment on the 1 billion tree cover campaign, where our members contribute to make significant change, either in cash or providing trees for planting in various parts of the country. We continue to promote the implementation of menstrual health for the women, menstrual health management best practices in industry, and the recognition of the needs of women as employees. The female employees, how they are cared for in the workplace. This is geared towards attracting and retaining more female talent in manufacturing at all levels. We also support members' social impact initiatives. We have the green manufacturing practices that we are promoting continuously to protect our environment through the Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation, where we basically promote efficient use of water, energy, raw materials, and generally improvement in our production capacities. Under the Center for Green Growth and Climate Change, we also seek to deepen industries' interventions or innovations on how they can use our center as a one-stop shop in promoting circular economy, import substitution strategies, climate change actions, and also technology and financial linkages. We have in place various initiatives to support manufacturers in responsible waste management, having contributed heavily to the waste management bill that was passed into law just the other day. We've also established we are currently driving the producer responsibility regulations so that we can be able to enhance how our KEPRO is seeking to address post-consumer waste in Kenya. Also bringing together different players who are facing challenges in the recycling sector and managing high volumes of waste that is generated towards making waste a resource. Also promoting responsible waste management. We have worked with community-based organizations that seek to promote circular economy by empowering young people to do so. When the pandemic broke out, our members were at the forefront to keep Kenya moving. They donated critical essential items to be used in the fight against COVID-19, such as masks, hand sanitizers, soaps, and hand washing stations across various communities, as well as public institutions like the police stations and other places with high interaction and high population. Through the Kenya COVID Fund Board, we also supported the vulnerable in society by providing them with basic necessities such as food across the country. In conclusion, the future holds a lot of promise for the manufacturing sector, also the country as a whole with all the stakeholders and its citizens. As such, we must center critical aspects of human development in our work and business ethos. Our concerted efforts are essential for a better tomorrow. We have a responsibility to the communities that we serve. This is why we are hosting this session today. We hope that you will gain insights that shall help you incorporate ESG into your business and also find ways of communicating the same to the public and to the stakeholders around us so that we can build on our collaborative activities and jointly move to a very sustainable economy. Thank you so much, and over to you, Grace. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Grace, for your insights. At this point, I'd like to welcome the Women in Manufacturing Chair, that's Ms. Miringechi, to make her remarks. Karibu, Chair.
So thank you, everyone, and happy that we have so many people who have attended this forum. I've seen we have attendance of over 50 participants. So that means that as women, we all appreciate that ESG is a topic that we need to embrace in our organization as we grow our businesses. As Grace has introduced me, I'm the current chair for Women in Manufacturing. At KAM, we have the program that we call Women in Manufacturing. And Women in Manufacturing program, what we are doing is to help and work with women so that we can be able to grow our businesses and we can be able to have conversations that help us to share our experiences. They also help us to point out and share opportunities that we can be able to grow our businesses, mentor each other, and learn from each other. So I'm hoping that we are all members of the Women in Manufacturing, and if we are not members of Women in Manufacturing, we can join the Women in Manufacturing. I think, Grace, we have two ways that we can be able to join in. We have what we call the SME Hub at the KM, which has a subscription that is subsidized. So you can join through that, but we also have other channels that you can be able to join in to become a woman in manufacturing. And we target women who are doing the actual manufacturing or women who are working in entities that are in manufacturing so that we can be able to give each other warmth. As most of the time we are saying that manufacturing is not for women. We want to scream and make noise and say that we are the drivers of the economy because we are in manufacturing and manufacturing is head of what the government is pushing. So in today's topic, I want to talk more as an entrepreneur and not necessarily just as a chair of Women in Manufacturing. And why I say that is because we are talking of how we include ESG into into our enterprises. And I would want to talk about maybe highlight some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we can be able to explore that. So it just make more sense for me to talk about ESG in my own organization, what I've seen benefits in it, and what are the challenges that I'm facing. So generally, as Joyce has said, I don't want to use a lot of technical word, so allow me to simply just speak plainly. I would say, why ESG in our enterprises? In the world today, there's a lot of conversation or several areas that are being mainstreamed, and they are required by investors when they look into their businesses, and they're also required in terms of compliance, even to access several areas that would want. And I'll maybe use the access to finance as one of the area that ESG is required. If today you walk into a bank and you want to borrow money, one of the things that the bank will tell you is that they need to come in and audit your environmental practice. And the environmental practice that they will look into is how you're disposing your waste, how you are minimizing your waste, and all such. They also need to understand your social responsibility. Are you giving to the community? How are you relating with the community as you are doing your businesses for best practice? And governance also for accountability and what, so that they are able to know that they are giving you money, and it's not only you who is running your business, you have governance structures in your businesses. So environmental, social, and governance are key areas into access to finance, into unlocking finances. One of the biggest challenges that we have there is that when a bank walk and talk about ESG audit, and they give you a list of what they want you to comply with, and you do not know how to comply with that. And with my experience, there are simple things that allows in terms of compliance of ESG. Most of the tools are in policies. How are your policies? And you look into maybe labor policy. Are you paying your staff right? Are you sourcing ethically? Those are policies that you can be able to put together in your organization, and you start the journey towards compliance of ESG. Other areas, I'm sure you've heard about fair trade. In terms of environment is how are you disposing? If you're in an environment maybe where you're working with chemical water, how do you dispose that to the environment? Are you caring for the environment as you're doing your day-to-day running of the business? Governance, we all understand that. I think the space that we have really not looked into is environment and social, because maybe governance, there's a lot of governance putting your structures and that, but environment and social has been an area that has not been tapped. But we have looked into that a lot as best practices for the organization, but it's now becoming a requirement for financiers that you need to comply with that. And they're simple things. So at KAM, part of what we are doing is coming up with programs, and we're able to train organizations that they understand, and we help them with the tools that are required so that they can be able to comply or understand that. So the other area you'd look into is like when you're looking into an investor, or when you are giving the story of your business. Imagine you're talking to somebody who is in Europe, and they care about ethical buying, or they are careful on those ones of like, in whatever it is that you're doing, you're not just benefiting yourself, and you're benefiting the whole value chain that you're working with. So that is critical for social, and you're able to put that communication in your storytelling about your business, which then makes you attractive, because other organizations that care about the same in the areas of ESG or sustainability, they see that you align with their values. So in terms of shared value, once you comply and you're able to understand what the global trends are, what are people more careful about now? We say that today people are not just buying products, they're also buying other values that comes in with the products. An example that is very critical is, does my buying benefit another person? And those, I think, are some of the practices that come in when you apply ESG compliance or practices in our businesses. So we are saying, as women enterprises, it is imperative that we take into consideration the need of adapting ESG in our businesses practices for the perspective and the value addition of our businesses. So when we practice ESG, we add value. So for me, those two I have highlighted, I think, are most critical. Being attractive to the people who you are doing business with, they see value in that. Being compliant, especially with financials who are coming into your business. And then also, if you look again now into compliance in regulatory, from the regulator angle, you'd look at, currently we have just, the government just signed in what they're calling the waste management bill. The waste management bill now, it's a responsibility for us that we comply with that. They are saying that we need also to give data, or we need to show how it is that we are disposing our waste. There's no industry that does not have waste. So we need to start now coming up with methodologies of how it is that we record our waste management or our waste reduction in our enterprises, so that by law, we are able to comply. So it is important that we understand then what are the tools that we need to do that. And there could be simple things like forms that answers the question that if any regulatory person walk into your organization, they're able to see, actually, this is my waste. I'm working with waste. Imagine, like now, I'm sure even in our own homes, we have maybe contracted people who collect our waste to go and dispose that. But how are we communicating that? Because that is a good practice. Even in our organization, when we have our waste, how are we disposing that? How are we being able to put that data together so that if anybody walks in terms from a regulatory compliance, we are able to show them that we are complying or we are disposing our waste in the required way. So regulatory compliance, it is simply just understand, what does the regulator want? How do the regulator want us to dispose our waste? Am I complying into that? And how am I keeping the record and the data around that? Then and that is part of what I would say, it is the reporting part of the ESG. You practice, you communicate it, then you need to come up to understanding, how do I report that? And reporting then comes differently from who needs the reporting and what are they looking into from the reporting. If it is a financier who you want to give a report to show that you comply with the ESG, how do they want that report put together? If it is the government, if it is regulatory, how do they want you to put that data together? The biggest challenge that we have today is the cost of doing that, because ESG has been embraced mostly by the multinationals, and we are seeing every day, day by day, that it is necessary now also that the SMEs are able to comply in that. So in terms of consulting, we have consultants who are there, quite expensive, and it becomes a huge cost for our businesses. So we are looking into which other ways are we able to unlock that so that we can be able to comply and not necessarily spend so much to comply. How do we start our journey today for compliance as we grow ourselves to full compliance, even in terms of inputting our resources? Then the other biggest challenge that we have are in human resource. This is a new thing that is coming in today. So most our human resource do not have capacity to even understand how to put up that data or to do the reporting or to actualize the methodology of complying with the ESG. So that also becomes a challenge. And this is also why at KM, we are looking into different programs, different structures that we can be able to do a bit of these trainings. And Joyce has talked about what we are doing at the Ukamilivu in areas of ESG. We have had a lot of communication, or there are so many words that are coming in: sustainability, circular economy, ESG, waste management. In my own perspective as an entrepreneur, all these things are related or they are intertwined. The SDGs, You simply just need to understand where to apply them, because they could be the same thing that somebody is using a different language. Not exactly, but you realize that when you start your sustainability journey, then it then means that you're complying with a lot of ESG. When you start your ESG, it is also a journey that you're complying from linear to a circular economy. So it is necessary to understand, what are we talking about when we talk about sustainability? What are we talking about when we talk about the SDGs? What are we talking about when we talk about ESG and circular economy? Because you realize that all these are related, because we are talking about being responsible, just being responsible in our consumption and responsible in how we use our resources. And most of them then are not regulated by compliance. We use them for self-regulation best practice, but they have much value when you're looking to grow your business or when you're looking to attract investors in your organization. So I wish to stop at that so that we have other speakers having the conversation. And over to you, Grace.
Thank you so much for your insights and even giving your personal experience on this topic. So we are joined by some very able panelists who are going to share with us their experiences in the journey of incorporating ESG in their business and its impact, among much more information that they'll be sharing. So ladies and gentlemen, feel free to share your questions to our speakers through the Q&A and comment sections of our chat. We'll have, once they're done, we'll have a Q&A session where they're going to respond to your questions. So at this juncture, I'd like to welcome Vince Plastic Limited, Business Development Manager, Ms. Saranjao, just to share Vince's practices through ESG and some of their impact and experiences, and much more that she can. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Saranjao, as introduced. I work at Vince Plastics. Vince Plastics is a plastic recycling company, and we recycle plastics that are dumped. We collect plastics from the dump sites. We work with CBOs that are engaged in environment, where we buy the plastics from them. I'm glad to see a few of our partners here who we are currently working with to promote, to ensure that we beat plastic pollution. So I'm going to discuss the cost of implication of incorporating ESGs. As our chair, Mary Ngechu, has said, it's very costly. We are currently wanting to be certified, to be ISO certified, and I received a quote and I was in shock. It's too expensive, so that wanting to go that way, the cost implications are extremely high. And I would love to hear if there would be a way, and especially since NSC is here, of how we can access the green bonds, whether there is a green way of getting us ISO certified as well. What are the metrics that we are currently using to assess our performance as Vince Plastics? One, as I introduced myself, you realize we are not your normal business. So we do a lot of informal. We've incorporated both formal and informal. We are 70% of our operations is informal, since we work with the informal sector, and then the 30%, that's where it formally is. Environment, we have classifications in 3 aspects. One, the environment bit of it. And since we handle a lot of plastic waste, one of them is that we have to be we are compliant with NEMA. So that one is done. And how do we follow that is that we make sure that we apply our licenses way in advance. NEMA has been extremely helpful because we work in 3 other counties other than in Nairobi. The other one is we've adopted a no zero waste policy. I don't know whether there are a few people who have been able to visit our factory in Embakasi, whereby for us, when we get the plastic from the dump sites and everywhere else, we actually, even towards the end, we make products such as buckets, basins, water tanks that are used for sanitation purposes. We are not yet at food grade level. And this, our post-production waste is actually brought back and the cycle continues. So we have a no zero waste policy. We also recycle our water just to make sure that we are water efficient. Then we also have the silt that comes out from, because the plastic that comes to us is quite dirty. We use that to do a little bit of construction work at the factory, and also that adulterated plastic that you cannot use it at all. We are making furniture such as stools, tables, outdoor infrastructure, a small gazebo that people would use, and also fencing poles. Our ecosystem impact, we are currently working to get in our carbon emission through GHG gas emissions that we are currently working on, just to see how much are we contributing in further polluting or unpolluting the environment. That we want to work with C40 cities who are quite big, and they have a partnership with the county government of Nairobi. But honestly, I don't know how we are going to perform in that, because we have a lot of movement of vehicles that play routes across the country. We are also very big in HSE, just to make sure that we are OSHA compliant. Our employees have PPEs, and PPEs are quite costly, because when an employee, because most of them are, you have a lot, you need a safety boot, you need an apron. We have people who do the washing, need a raincoat, they need special gas masks, they need earmuffs because of the crashes, and also hair caps because of the ladies. And by the way, our factory, 50% or 60%, we work with the ladies. Ladies understand more color and texture of plastics faster. What our biodiversity, since when you look at ESG and especially the environment aspect, these days they have incorporated something on biodiversity. How well are you working to protect your biodiversity? And for us, that as Vince Plastic, that is a very core aspect of our operations from the founder's vision, is that we make sure we protect our water bodies. And that's why we are very prominent in various areas that are promoting blue economy. So we have an operation center in Nakuru, catering for that whole Lake Nakuru County, because of Lake Elementaita, Lake Naivasha, and Lake Nakuru itself. We are also we have an operation in Mombasa, which takes care of the whole coastal strip. We work as far as Lamu, we work as far as Diani, and all that, and we work with CBOs and even the fishermen. The other one is governance. We are big in governance. We have, that one has been put in place, and yes, that is okay. And social governance, there's something called in the aspect of the social bit of it, where you put in the employees that you have into a capacity development program. We are members of the UN Global Compact, which is housed by CAM. And through that, most of us, the employees, are able to learn various aspects. And as our chair was talking about SDGs, we are currently in class learning how to report and in accordance to the Sustainable Development Goals. And what so far the impact of incorporating ESGs in our company is that we are able to meet our vision and objective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I see you've alluded to the question of costs, and I know NSC will provide some feedback on that. It's a question that has been raised by one of our participants. So now moving on to the next speaker, I'd like to invite Green Building Society CEO and ESG lead, Ms. Nasra Nanda, to the floor.
Thank you so much, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say good morning to our listeners. Thank you for attending this session. To start off, I'd like to say that as more investors take ESG as a key consideration, it is exciting to see that the Kenya Association of Manufacturing is taking fantastic strides in driving ESG through its social impact efforts and initiatives Ukamilifu. As the Kenya Green Building Society, we look forward to collaborating as key stakeholders in the market to support where we can and drive the ESG agenda forward together with CAM. I'm also particularly excited to have an exciting lineup of incredible women who are driving and shaping change in the market towards ESG and are leading voices in advocating for a more impactful way of doing business. So kudos to all the women who are speaking today. On my end, I'd like to start off by saying that this webinar is timely for the market and is a buildup of a series of conversations and partnerships we have taken as the Kenya Green Building Society since July, where we as the Kenya Green Building Society held a key stakeholder session and invited various industry players, including KAM and regulators nationally, with the aim of driving ESG and having an ESG national action plan for Kenya, with the aim of utilizing Kenya's position as the climate change champion for Africa to lead the ESG conversation, not just nationally, but on a regional capacity ahead of and after the COP27, which is going to be the first African COP in a long time, if ever. So very briefly, to introduce KGBS, I'd like to say that the Kenya Green Building Society is a member-based, independent, non-political, non-profit organization whose mission is to lead the development of Kenya's built environment and encourage the transformation of the built environment towards sustainability. As an established member of the World Green Building Council, KGBS is a champion of advocacy and works with key stakeholders to drive the sustainability agenda. So this topic is very important to us as KGBS in particular, because real estate and the construction industry accounts for about 40% of the CO2 emissions worldwide. So we essentially are the largest player that could change the game from an emissions perspective. So for this reason, it's no surprise that ESG and its influence on real estate is now starting to shape how investors view real estate investment and funding the built environment generally, and more regulations and best policy practices around the world are starting to emerge because governments and investors are realizing that a big game changer would be to tackle greening and incentivizing ESG in the built environment supply chain. And as a business, generally, you need to understand that ESG is important because your stakeholders are now having different expectations. They expect that you will enhance your business performance. They expect not only that you will make money, but they're now looking at how you make the money. And as a business, as these developments arise, it becomes more important to look at the kind of consumer you attract, because there's a rise of a different kind of consumer, a socially and environmentally conscious consumer. And this is from research, it's more prevalent with millennials and women. And these two target consumers take their time to assess what's in the market and also view it in comparison with their own personal values before investing. And these two consumers happen to be now also shaping investor trends, because as women rise the ranks in businesses and as millennials are now also rising ranks, this is changing the way business is being done. So today I'm here to talk about two two main themes. The first is the key ESG trends that women-owned enterprises could potentially tap into to enhance their impact in society. And then second, the environmental practices or sustainability practices that a business should incorporate or should consider incorporating in its journey towards being more ESG compliant or sustainable. So to kick off, I would start by saying that interest in ESG investing has been growing for years. So it's actually not something new, but it was accelerated rapidly because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which then saw the rise of these new investors, as I earlier mentioned. And the trends that I'm seeing, which are relevant generally, and then I'll give it the women-led spin, is that as ESG becomes more important, there is increasing pressure on corporate boards and government leaders to enhance their ESG skills. And this means, therefore, that ESG is becoming everyone's problem, because even if your company or your business or your organization is not ready to start off or implement the ESG journey, it's very, very relevant for businesses to have the capacity to understand what ESG is, not just when interacting with potential investors, but also how it affects them from a reputational perspective, from a social perspective when it comes to dealing with employee issues, health and safety issues, and of course, how that reflects in their operating market. And increasingly now there's rising pressure for corporate boards and government leaders to demonstrate that they're adequately equipped to understand and oversee ESG issues, from climate change to human rights to social unrest and diversity, not just in the workforce, but at board level, where now it's very, very important to have women in boards, women represented in the workforce, and also women-related or minority-related issues given adequate attention. So this is a key trend emerging globally. The second is that regulators are now pushing for ESG considerations and reporting standards, and are demanding more credible corporate disclosures, which are more holistic in nature. Here locally, we had the CBK last year issue the climate disclosure guidance notes. We also have the NSC, who also published the ESG disclosure guidance manual. Aside from that, there are conversations happening in different industries, from the task force that was set up by the insurance industry, and also developers now, looking at green affordable housing as a potential way of plugging in ESG into the real estate industry. So ESG is really here to stay, and it's not going anywhere. We're also seeing a trend of capital markets globally now conscious to align with international players and also align themselves with sustainability goals. So this is very, very important because that means there's pressure globally, regionally, and nationally to drive this agenda. We're also seeing that governments and companies are facing the challenge of assisting the country fulfill its obligations under the Paris Agreement, which essentially means that any net zero pledges are now starting to materialize as not just conversations or paperwork commitments, but now government is being onboarded to look at ESG as something that would help them meet their commitments on a global level playing field. And this is why, for example, recently the president made his announcement on prioritizing climate change. And also recently, the governor of Nairobi County was also talking about considering green bonds as a way of pushing for the growth of the urban development of Nairobi. So that's now signaling a lot more uptake of ESG as a way of solving development agendas. I think the other thing which is important and relevant in Kenya is also how ESG is helping governments now assess how they can utilize or look at natural capital and biodiversity risks and opportunities. Governments are now looking at progressing and acting on protecting biodiversity in their operations. And corporates are not left behind because they're also looking at managing across their supply chains, how they can do better to protect environments which they operate in. And lastly, I think from a social perspective, social issues in supply chains are now more than ever commanding more attention. And beyond resilience, we're also seeing that the social issues are affecting the reputations of brands if they're ignored, which has potentially a financial impact because investors also choose to distance themselves from any business that fails to adequately protect their workforce or are not compliant with human rights best practices. And for this reason, therefore, it becomes very, very important, not just for women, but businesses to be very mindful of these changes. And with respect to women, there's the added layer of ensuring that as a leader, a woman has that layer of obligation to ensure that minorities are well protected, women's issues are addressed from sexual harassment and any kind of harassment and bullying in the workplace. This is something that is becoming very key and is the undoing of several companies in the West because it was overlooked. So as you lead an organization as a woman, you will find that you are actually the face of diversity. And it becomes important then to ensure that also your operations are tapping into the trends that I mentioned. The second, and I think the last thing I want to talk about today is what sustainable environmental practices that businesses should consider in this journey as we think about ESG. So largely, I will talk about it from a built environment perspective, but it's relevant to all industries because of the issues I'm tackling in what I'm going to mention. So the first thing that businesses can consider doing is reducing their building energy footprint by either operating greener portfolios from a real estate perspective or taking measures to ensure that their buildings are more eco-friendly. And this means, therefore, if businesses in Kenya, for example, where the largest asset base for businesses is real estate, because most companies either lease a property or own a property for their functions and operations, the first recommendation is going green from a portfolio perspective. And a green building really is a building that has the ability to maintain or improve its environment or occupants' quality of life. And often it's because this building uses or conserves energy and is built on recycled materials and reduces the pollution. And this is important because ultimately real estate plays a bigger role because investors are increasingly aware that real estate can have a significant social impact as well as the environmental impact to communities and the market, because real estate can play the form of rehabilitating public spaces, helping the affordable housing agenda, or catering to low and mid-income population sets by also tackling social housing. And the reason there's growing pressure on organizations for this is, it goes back to, the built environment being responsible for 40% of CO2 emissions. And the benefits of building green is that businesses can utilize going green from a built environment perspective, or utilizing going green from their buildings as a way of reducing their carbon footprint, as a way of ensuring that they have durability, because green buildings are built to last. And then also as a way of ensuring cost savings, because green buildings have lower operating costs, and they are also socially friendly, because whoever occupies a greener building or more energy efficient building has an improved health and comfort angle. And sustainable buildings also look at lessening the burden on local infrastructure, which becomes an important conversation, not just for businesses, but for citizens as well. The second thing I would point out is, I'd point out is encouraging circularity in the operations of a business. And we do this at KGBS through our Jenga Green Library, which is a directory of green building materials and services developed by KGBS in partnership with FSD Kenya. And it aspires to be a one-stop shop which displays the entire supply chain of sustainable building materials and services. And the aim of doing this sustainability through a supply chain is to assist all the players within the supply chain to efficiently identify green products and services, and also establish the business case for policymakers to go green. And largely tied to that is, if we go green from a supply chain perspective, it also helps communities or the public really uptake green, so that eventually when you do make it a law, we already have buy-in from the market that we are operating in. And my last point, in terms of a business's journey to green, is businesses should now consider positioning themselves for sustainable finance. And this is really important because currently there's a lot of investment funds locked because businesses are not taking the extra step of tying their capital needs with a social need or an environmental need, or something that could be identified or tied to a social or environmental need. So if businesses could take a step back and look at what ways they can assist the environment, what ways they can assist communities, or even identify how they as a business operate sustainably, then they can position themselves to have a strategic response to any financial challenges that they may have, because sustainable finance presents a new way of raising funding, a new way of attracting investors and partners that could support an organization. And I think I would like to stop there, but thank you so much for giving me this opportunity once again. And I look forward to the Q&A session and hearing everyone else's views. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Najra, for your insights. At this point, I'd like to invite BAT Head of Corporate Affairs, that's Ms. Mimi Mavuti, to share insights from her end. Sorry, Mimi, you're on mute.
Story of our lives. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed. Thank you.
Sorry for that, everyone. So thank you, everyone, for making the time to attend. I think we have about a little over 60 participants, so it's really nice to see that this conversation is gaining interest and traction. And I think it's only up that I say thank you to the CAMP team for the opportunity and the platform. I think we do collaborate quite a lot with CAMP. Of course, we are members, and we do have some of our staff members, in various CAMP committees. And so this is something that is very close to us as BAT. But I think I'll kick off by just giving you a little bit of insight into how the environment has shifted globally as I try to address the issue of, good business, why should businesses actually adopt ESG? So just in terms of a little flashback, some of you might remember a few years back, maybe around the 2000s, 2009 to 2009, the buzzword was CSR. And this space was when I think the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights were starting to come into play. So you saw a lot of organizations, doing donations, charity work, going over and above profit. And then that developed into sustainability around 2010 to say 2019, in the advent of the UN Sustainability Development Goals. And then around 2020, we started hearing ESG, and this was, so to speak, driven by, developments out of organizations like the World Economic Forum, organizations like the TCFD, Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures, as they were trying to address certain issues that were becoming really pertinent in the world, for example, climate change, environmental degradation, and the like. So as Nasra has said, ESG is actually here to stay. The acronyms might change, the terms might change, but the principle and the spirit, I think, will only develop into bigger and better visions and outcomes. And for me, I think the most important thing to take out from this whole ESG conversation is that it is anchored on shared value and it is anchored on impact. So if you look at CSR and sustainability, or the practice that was the preceding practice, it was pretty much businesses doing what they felt was good for the business to do. But with ESG, you actually have, the pillars have been defined in terms of environment, social governance. You have certain instruments and tools that guide businesses in terms of what is material or what matters to your business. So I think for us, the issue of stakeholder capitalism, meaning that your business now has to actually be stakeholder driven, which is opposed to an internal lens where you figure out what you want to do as a business and then push it out into the world. So pretty much ESG, being shared value, measures impact across the business on its stakeholders. And I think some of the things that are really pushing this evolution, and Madam Mary has spoken to some of these things, including, the mainstreaming of sustainable investment. Investors are looking to invest in businesses that are doing good, businesses that are going over and above to deliver value to their stakeholders. This helps them manage risk. For listed companies, this might include perhaps stock crashes, and I think Madam Boyd from the NSC will speak to that a little bit later. So over and above, the sustainable investment, you also have a discerning population. Mary also spoke to this in terms of you're not selling a product, you're not selling a service, you're actually selling values. And so therefore, you have to actually create value for the business and for the people that are actually investing in your business, be it through buying products or utilizing your services. And then the other thing, of course, number 3 is increased regulatory scrutiny. Nasra has just spoken about, the notes from the CBK. She's spoken about the NSC guidelines. Right now, in Kenya, I believe it's largely voluntary in terms of ESG adoption and ESG reporting. For listed companies, we do have instruments like the CMA code that does speak to ESG reporting, but it's largely voluntary. What companies are doing, and such as BAT, we've been reporting as part of our annual report. But now we are going into developing an independent report with all that meet actually the requirements of the various guidelines and standards. What I would want perhaps to highlight as you kick off your ESG journey is to be aware of greenwashing. And this is largely applies when you're talking about environmental impact or environmental value or gains, whereby, organizations get lost in the marketing bit of things as opposed to actually showing impact. So you need to be very careful when you're communicating, your achievements, your milestones, what you're doing, and making sure that you're sticking to factual information. For example, I think we have majority women here, so some of us are naturalistas. You will start noticing, or you've started noticing that some of our hair products say eco-friendly, or eco-friendly packaging, or they say no sulfates, no parabens, and the like. But they don't really quantify what is the actual impact of that to the environment. So without verifiable data, then you cannot claim to be eco-friendly. You cannot claim to be good for the environment. So, and that is what ESG is trying to do. Rein in, the general speak and trying to drive verifiable information that can actually show impact. So in terms of, should it be voluntary, should it be mandatory? I think the most important thing is that businesses should ideally now be purpose-led, or businesses are moving towards purpose-led organizations, meaning you are taking an all-stakeholder approach, meaning that you will want to drive that from the conscience of the business and not because someone is whipping a kiboko telling you must report. You'll notice that globally, countries with ESG mandates, such as China, Australia, South Africa, or the United Kingdom, a lot of these countries, for example, China, you'll notice their emissions are higher than average per capita. So this helps them, if you mandate reporting, this helps the government actually track and hold you into account. So which forces you then to go back to your business and make sure you're putting in place, the frameworks to actually achieve what has been mandated. I think the other driver of mandating ESG would be, when you have things like common law and you have common understanding, and it's able to be achieved across a certain ecosystem, so to speak. But in markets where I think some of these things are still not as problematic. I mean, we are getting there as Africa, and I think that is why we're having this conversation. That is why the regulators and organizations like the NSC have issued guidelines, because we all need to start taking this journey seriously. So for me, I think the question of voluntary or mandatory ESG adoption and reporting is driven by the market context. But ideally, we should all be aspiring to do the right thing as far as ESG is concerned. So a lot of, I think Mary, Nazra have spoken to this in terms of why is ESG good for business. I will just reiterate maybe 3 key points. We have integrity and trust. Ultimately, we are running a business, and some of us have brands, and this contributes to brand equity. Pretty much it gives you a social license to operate, because brand equity is built over time. You will know the likes of Coca-Cola, the likes of Unilever. These are these are sort of heritage brands, historical names, and this has been built over time. And they are also some of the leading businesses when it comes to ESG. So that integrity and trust now is actually being driven from a consumer point of view. Of course, the other thing is regulatory compliance. We don't operate in a vacuum. We have laws and regulations that we have to follow. So this is just simple logic that, you need to comply with the guidelines that exist, the laws and regulations that exist. And of course, this also feeds into the issue of shareholder value, whether you're listed or you're not listed. You do have shareholders that expect some sort of return at the end of the day. And this ties back to compliance. The issue of access to financing has also been spoken about. This ties back to market access, of course, operational efficiencies. At BAT, when it comes to factory efficiencies and the like, we are driving programs like the integrated work systems. We are very big on energy management, electricity saving, solar power, water saving, and that sort of thing. So it really does end up being beneficial for your business. When it comes to asset financing, some of you probably will have seen some studies. For example, it's a study from Morgan Stanley that says 67% of global asset owners are actually driving towards this whole thing of ESG, and specifically now something that has been brought into the fold is actually the gender lens investing. And this is impact investing, which deliberately integrates gender analysis into investment analysis and decision making. So pretty much this is a focus on women-led enterprises, those that promote gender equality at the workplace, products, services that substantially improve the lives of women and girls. And there's a study out there, I don't remember the author, that actually says gender diverse teams make better business decisions up to 73% of the time. I think that's pretty significant. In the same breath, they say about 42 businesses that have embedded gender diversity actually records a 42% higher return on sales. So, I mean, there are statistics out there that show you that ESG is good for business. Locally, I think we are tracking steadily on the issue of gender. On the NSC, I think as far as last year, an Equality report for 2021 put women on boards at about 23%. The likes of Stanchart, Safaricom, Absa being some of the leading businesses. As far as BAT is concerned, our board, women on our board comprise 33%. And we are steadily working, of course, to improve that. So I think in a nutshell, why is ESG good for business? Builds your brand equity. It helps you comply with the regulatory requirements and drives shareholder value. And it also helps you in terms of access to financing, which boomerangs into market access and operational efficiencies. So moving into, best practice and how BAT, what best practice actually means for BAT. First of all, I will say in 2020, and I have talked about purpose-led organizations. So in March 2020, BAT globally, we rolled out an evolved strategy and purpose to build a better tomorrow for our stakeholders. And in a nutshell, this would be consumers, society, employees, and shareholders. And to drive this, we have put ESG at the front and center of everything we do. And for us, in terms of, if I was to say 4 key, buckets that we, that anchor our practice or that organizations can perhaps adopt as best practice is number 1, of course, strategy and purpose. You have to define why you exist. And that is where BAT went back to the drawing board and said, okay, what is it that we want to do? And, for the good, for shared value rather. And we said, you know what, based on the nature of the industry we operate, our responsibility is actually to reduce the health impact of our business. And we are doing that by introducing reduced risk products in various markets. So ESG in terms of environment for us, we are looking at, afforestation, because we do have tobacco farmers who use a percentage of wood fuel to cure the tobacco. So we are very big on afforestation. I think since 1978, we have planted over 54 million surviving trees with the local, with tobacco farmers and the local communities. And our annual target is to actually plant at least 2 million trees. And so far we've been able to track well on that. The other bit in terms of environmental focus is, of course, water and waste. Last year, so we have a manufacturing factory in Nairobi, and we have a green leaf processing plant in Thika. So last year, our Thika plant actually got certified by the Global Alliance for Water Stewardship because of our water governance practices. We are working towards getting certification for our Nairobi factory. And I believe we must be either the only company or perhaps the second that has the AWS certification in Kenya. From a social perspective, we focus on issues to do with gender diversity, inclusion. So we have targets such as achieving 50% gender balance by 2025. We're currently tracking at about 41% in the whole organization. We have a target to increase the representation of PWDs, or rather people with disabilities, in the business by 5% by 2025. From a governance perspective, of course, we are focusing on ethics. We are looking at 100% adherence to our standards of business conduct. Our international marketing principles, our prevention of underage access to our products, which is very big for us, and we work
Hi all, I think we've lost Mimi. So as we wait for her perhaps to join in, we could have Wendy Boyd share insights from her end. Yes, so Wendy is a senior officer at NSC for Corporate Affairs and Investor Relations. Please proceed.
Thank you, Grace, and good morning all. Thank you, CAM, for the opportunity and for the platform to speak about ESG today. So the NSC published its ESG Disclosures Guidance Manual in November 2021. It's basically a culmination of our observation on the necessity of ESG principles as a benchmark on good governance after carrying out extensive engagement with listed companies in Kenya. So we noted a general awareness of ESG issues and corporate sustainability. However, there was lack of sustained capacity building on how organizations can integrate ESG into their business strategies, and ultimately how to report ESG performance in a consistent, transparent, and principle-based approach that meets stakeholder expectations, hence the need for the ESG manual. Let me just mention that our manual can be used by companies of any size, and not just listed companies, but also unlisted companies. So just to highlight our manual briefly, it's aimed to help companies in their interactions with investors and the wider financial community, and to help organizations understand how to address ESG issues as a key component of investor relations, as well as main principles to consider when you're preparing your ESG reports. So in addition, the manual provides a guide to collect, to analyze, and to publicly disclose ESG details about how the company's business activities are coming along. So the ultimate goal is to encourage Kenyan companies to progressively assimilate ESG strategies in order to move performance management and meet international best practices. So our ESG manual is divided into various sections that cover ESG reporting process, and they include ESG reporting principles, the ESG reporting boundary, the key steps in the ESG reporting process, publishing your ESG report, and finally, ESG reporting requirements from other organizations. Also, just to mention, our manual recommends the use of GRI standards, which are the most internationally applied ESG reporting standards. So we have seen various regulatory bodies, issue or rather propose guidelines towards ESG reporting, including the CMA, who published a code in 2015 for boards, indicating that boards of listed companies are required to consider the ESG impact of their business and formalize their ESG strategies. So the reality is that for the past few years, many listed companies were already implementing some form of ESG reporting, not only to meet the demands of the growing number of institutional and sovereign investors, but with ESG investing approaches, but also as a means of pursuing long-term economic growth in a more sustained way. However, there was no clear reporting standards that applied, and there was inconsistent approach to ESG practices. This means that previous ESG reporting by listed companies was fragmented. So the ESG manual goes a long way in creating a consistent and transparent disclosure framework. So listed companies in Kenya have a grace period of 1 year, which lapses in November this year. And after that, listed companies will be expected to report on ESG, either in their integrated annual report or as a separate sustainability report. Actually, from the launch of our ESG guidelines, we've seen a lot of listed companies already doing separate sustainability reports, but more than half of the listed companies are doing integrated reports. So some Kenyan listed companies are already ahead of the curve in relation to their internal ESG reporting processes. However, all companies should dedicate time and resources to verify whether their ESG framework is aligned with the manual, as well as determine what steps they need to take to be fully compliant before the end of the grace period. So to further drive the adoption of ESG reporting among listed companies, NSC partnered with Risk Insights, which is an ESG data provider in Africa, based in South Africa. So to provide access to ESG ratings, ESG disclosure information, ESG news, and strategic business intelligence to NSC listed companies. So Risk Insights has already assessed all our listed companies, and we have data on how the listed companies are performing in terms of ESG reporting. So we're able to see how every company, based on the industry and the sector, are performing on the E, the S, and the G pillar. So through this partnership, we expect that listed companies, asset managers, regulators, and other stakeholders will benefit from a flexible platform that collects, measures, and analyzes corporate sustainability disclosure data, as well as generates high-quality strategic business intelligence impacts reports. So my fellow panelist, Mimi, mentioned greenwashing. You see, now with data, we're able to mitigate such risks when it comes to ESG reporting, because we're able to show that this company is disclosing this data is disclosing this information on their environment or on their social impact, and indeed it is accurate or not, based on the tool. So moreover, NSC is working closely with CMA to introduce an ESG index in future, which will track performance of companies with superior ESG practices. So all the above, in addition to creating stakeholder and company dialogues on ESG reporting, as well as workshops and trainings, also the availability of financial products at the exchange, such as green bonds, which we launched in 2020, as well as we're in the process of establishing a carbon trading facility, which now companies that can buy carbon credits in order to offset their carbon emissions. So these are just some of the measures that NSC is taking to encourage the adoption of ESG and ESG reporting. So there's various benefits of the ESG manual, as it is not only providing valuable and best practice on principles for avoiding negative social and environmental impact, but also the process to follow when reporting on ESG. First, the reporting process will eventually provide empirical data on the correlation of ESG performance and financial performance of companies. So stakeholders will be able to track ESG performance of listed companies when they publish their reports. Secondly, Kenyan organizations will be compliant with international standards of ESG reporting. We carefully synthesized international best practices in ESG reporting with the particulars of the Kenyan corporate landscape. So the manual draws on expertise from international guidelines such as GRI Standards 2021 and the European Commission Guidelines on Non-Financial Reporting 2019. As a result, Kenyan listed companies and organizations have specific guidance on ESG reporting that did not exist before and are therefore encouraged to increase their efforts in integrating ESG in their general corporate governance goals. So thirdly, a report by KPMG states that 80% of companies worldwide now report on sustainability on their business. This is evidence of a major shift in incorporating non-financial metrics in performance management. ESG reporting will become mainstream for major companies in the near future as regulatory changes that make ESG disclosure a mandatory requirement are on the rise. Firstly, the new corporate sustainability reporting standards being developed by EU will contribute to the global convergence of reporting, and I believe the regulation has already hit EU. So secondly, the IFRS trustees have set out an intention to develop enterprise value standards so that financial reporting is inclusive of risks and opportunities presented by a company's sustainability performance. So in conclusion, the NSC through its strategy aims to drive ESG transition for the national economy and is well placed to support businesses and other organizations with the ESG efforts and initiatives to unlock value for clients, shareholders, stakeholders, and the wider society. Thank you. Back to you, Grace.
Thank you so much, Wendy. So there are a lot of questions with regard to reporting, but just before we proceed with the question, I wanted just to inform participants, feel free to share any questions that you have through our Q&A and chat boxes, and then we'll have our panelists respond to them. So just to kick off the session, Wendy, just give us an update if there are any cost-effective routes to produce a report that meets the international accepted standards that has come up, and secondly, how members can get a hold of the manual that is developed on that front. Asante.
Okay, so what I would encourage companies to do is just have a look at our manual. It's available on the NSC website under regulatory guidelines. So the manual, it's very easy to understand, and it takes you step by step on how to, from content creation up to the point where you're publishing your ESG report. So it will help you go through the whole process, what principles to adopt when producing your sustainability report, how to go about stakeholder engagement, how to go about materiality assessment, and we actually give guidance on the kind of material topics that will be expected on each sector. So you check under manufacturing, what is the general materiality, what is the material topics under the E, under S, and under G. And then the manual takes you through how to do quality assurance and assessment of your report, and how finally to publish your report. So it's a very step-by-step, easy to understand. Then from there, you're free to choose as an organization how to go about it. So our manual also speaks about the various roles. So the governance structure in the organization. So what's the role of the board? What's the role of the CEO? Then what's the role of the sustainability manager? So as a company, you also need to resource and equip a sustainability manager who is able to champion the sustainability reporting process. So I think with that, then you'll be well placed to make the decision on how to come up with your sustainability report. So the other question is around, is there an organization that regulates the reports themselves? That is the standardized ESG report that can be certified as reaching international global standards. Who regulates the consultants carrying out the reports? Okay, so our manual does recommend the use of GRI standards, which are most globally applied standards. So it does outline the principles that the GRI standard recommends when it comes to your sustainability report. So just a minute as I handle the other question. So I know various stakeholders require some kind of reporting based on, could be membership. If you're a listed company, there's a CMA code, the CMA code. We have investor groups such as IFC that have the performance standards on environment and social sustainability standards. We have the United Nations Global Compact. NSC is a member of the Kenyan arm of United Nations Global Compact, as well as other organizations, I'm sure, on this platform who are members. So, you know, UNGC have developed a set of 10 principles that organizations voluntarily adopt and integrate into their own strategies. The principle covers human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. We also have the CDP. Signatories of CDP are required to have some form of reporting. And then we have industry level reporting. So for example, in the banking sector. So if you apply the NSC manual, it assists listed companies in complying with reporting requirements from other organizations. So you don't have to look at them separately, just use our manual as a reference point and you're able to comply with the other requirements.
Right, thank you, Wendy. We have Haron Mukiri from Global Compact. Haron, perhaps you could just share a bit of insights on ESG reporting and how that links into the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. Haron?
Okay, thank you, Grace. And on the ESG reporting, and as mentioned by Wendy, our framework largely is about focusing on the 4 issue areas of human rights, labor, environment, and corruption. And these are clear elements of environmental and social and governance reporting, as it were. So the 10 principles guides the companies to look at the various efforts they are putting on the 4 issue areas, and that way they can be able to report. It's good to note that if you're a member of UN Global Compact, you are easily supported because currently we are establishing a very easy to use reporting framework, which is in form of 55 minimum questions that are touching on the 4 issue areas plus governance. That helps you now to have a clarity on where you are in terms of the disclosures that you will make as a company or as an organization. In case you're falling off, you're likely again to set or have sustainability plans against what you're falling behind. So this is what I can say, Grace, for now, that will encourage organizations that are not yet party to UN Global Compact to join in, because I know it can ease their reporting framework. As alluded by Wendy, is that our reporting is well aligned with the other global reporting framework like GRI, and we have co-created this framework with them. So this can be a very good starting point for any organization of whichever size, industry or sector. And I will encourage you to be able to join the UN Global Compact so that you can be able to learn much more and also, elevate your game in the ESG space. Sorry, Grace, I could not be on camera. My machine has a challenge, but I hope I have been able to communicate to our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Haron. Just before we release you, and from where you sit, who checks the accuracy and completeness of ESG metrics disclosed by entities? Because I know you get a few reports shared with your end, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much again, Grace, on this. For currently, most of the organization, or even from our Kenyan, or even regionally as Africa, our reporting is voluntary. It is not yet, regulatory in nature, where organizations are mandatorily expected to meet some specific threshold. What we do here is having you adopt the global best practices. And this is to say, for sure, currently we don't verify the accuracy or authenticity of your information. But with the new reporting framework, which I have alluded to, the 55 plus questionnaire document, we'll be able to be providing continuous feedback to the participating organizations so that they can be able to improve. You might have observed that in some other developed markets, the likes of European Union, they have regulatory mandate to prepare the sustainability reporting. So is it also with the American companies, and they have regulatory agencies that are mandated again to review their disclosures. Before we get at that level, I know we need to master the ropes well at the voluntary stage. And when it gets to the regulatory requirement of some minimum thresholds disclosures, will not be caught out as a surprise or a shock. So this is to say that currently we don't have like a checker or a verifier. But when you look at our framework, we'll ask you, is your data verified? If you choose to use international verifiers, who currently I know we don't have many practicing here in Kenya and in Africa, you can use them, and that is a way of raising credibility of your ESG disclosures, and that way you'll be able to attract again impact investors to your portfolio. With that said and done, is to say, joining the voluntary framework when it is required mandatorily to report and disclose within some set criteria, you'll be above, or you'll be ahead of the curve, so to speak. Thank you very much, Grace.
Thank you so much,
Grace. Just
Yes.
to add on to that,
Sure.
companies can use internal resources to verify their sustainability reports, as well as use a third party. There are companies that do verify an assurance on sustainability reports. And if you choose to go with the GRI standards, one of the principles is verifiability. So in the information that you're gathering, that you're recording and compiling, it should be able to be verified.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for that information. So I want to ask a question to Meringechu, Mimi Mavuti, and Saranjao by virtue of the enterprises that they are in. So organizations are trying to are working towards integrating the people within their value chains to ensure that they also incorporate ESG in their practices. So in this end, and by virtue of each of you having different value chains, just share with us insights on how you go about that from your end, and perhaps something that participants can pick out from your organizations. And to do that, we'll start with Mimi, then followed by Meringet, and then closed by Sarah.
Okay, I hope you can hear and see me now.
Perfectly.
Okay, great. Apologies for that technical glitch. So I think pretty much it's still voluntary. So what we are doing is actually leading by example. From a governance point of view, and when I say leading by example, I would say when it comes to the technical aspects. So for example, yes, we have set targets when it comes to carbon emissions. So right now we are focusing up until 2030 We want to be carbon neutral, at least in our operations. And then by 2050, we shall extend that to the whole value chain. Compliance, I would say, is an investment. It's a journey. So right now, what we are doing for our extended supply or value chain is actually focusing on capacity building. So we are doing training, we are doing workshops, but we are also, from the side of governance, we have policies such as our supplier code of conduct, our standards of business conduct, our environmental policies, our whistleblowing policies that also apply to our ecosystem. So in terms of governance, we actually do have structures, and that was part of my presentation, which, by the way, I was just concluding, so I don't think you missed too much, in terms of governance and policies to bring that the ESG framework in your organization and your purpose to life. So I think in a nutshell, what I would say right now in terms of the technical aspects, we are leading by example. In terms of governance, we have put in place policies and instruments to guide responsible business across the value chain.
Thank you very much, Meringeta.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you, Wedi, and all the speakers who spoken there before, especially Nasra, Harun, and Wendy from NIC, because you give us a lot of insight on the framework that are being used currently around the ESG. In my organization as Line Plus Group, what we are trying to do for our value chain, I would say we have, I run an initiative that I call Takataka ni Mali. And because we are manufacturing packaging, and if you look at one of the requirements now, even for my regulatory compliance in what we are calling extended producer responsibility, I started this initiative 2017, but is now becoming a law that we need to be responsible for the packaging waste that we send to the environment. So we help to organize and bring out opportunities that can be tapped into, especially when you're looking into environment and waste management. So we as an organization work with different groups, develop different groups, and help them to get opportunity across the value chain. So as we are taking care of the environment, as we are taking care of our social, then we are also helping them to build enterprises that also are around that. Why we are creating value is because from my own experience, looking into the levels of our country and the incomes and the earnings of our people, it is critical that as much as we volunteer to do the best practice, that also we are able to earn something. So if then value is created around waste, then it makes more people want to participate in that. So we kill two birds with one stone, taking care of the environment and also earning something, especially from the recyclable. And this also, we are working in collaboration with different organizations. KAM is one of them. And this help to push the best practice, especially in environment around the plastic management. The other area that I am also doing as a leader, a business leader, from the sitting in as the chair for women in manufacturing, I also sit in as the chair for SME at KEPSA, is working with also good like-minded organization and having a lot of mentorship, coaching and training and conversation, so that other businesses are also able to understand this space, so that, as we have said, that compliance is a journey, we can start that journey or embracing that journey of compliance, and not just complying, being good, responsible people, because everybody wants to take care of our next generation. I think as much as we want to make money, we want to take care of our next generation. So preaching the gospel, talking to the other organization, also reading by example. One of the biggest challenge then that I would pose is, and I hear Mimi talking about what they are doing from an organization as BAT, that they may be able to even adopt this reporting and that. And you've talked about verifiability from international bodies, from Global Compact or NSC. Are we looking into locally building capacity to simply just organization that can be able to verify and building credibility, that those companies can be able to verify even for SMEs as we are moving towards that journey. So that if we are looking into tapping in the impact investment, even if you have not verified from an international level, there's a bit credibility that we have consultants or we have organizations that can be able to really verify the data that we are putting together, and you still can be able to tap into that. I think it's a question I'm asking to me and to everyone else, and see whether it's a journey that we need to start. Back to you, Grace.
Thank you so much, Chair. Now I'll proceed to Sarah. The same question to you as well.
Kindly repeat. I didn't understand it very well.
So businesses are trying to incorporate ESG. As much as businesses are incorporating ESG within their organization, I also know that they are extending this to their value chain. So the people they work with, either backward or forward. So the question is, what is Vince doing to that front, just to encourage more people to incorporate ESG within their practices?
So I'll touch only on one of our value chains, that is the CBOs that we work with in waste collection, in plastic waste collection. What we've done is just to make sure that we train them on HSE and ensuring that we kit them with safety gear, the aprons, the gumboots, and even the gloves when they are collecting. We also encourage them to be compliant with NEMA, and so just to guide them on the processes on how to do it. So that's how we are working with our value chain. And also the other one is just with now the producers, we are part of CAREPRO, where we and also participate during the formation and incorporation of any environment laws, and giving our perspective to the policy makers as participants. So that's what we are currently doing.
Okay, thank you. So there was a question on how ESG compliance, how does ESG compliance affect taxation? Wendy, perhaps you could comment on this, because I've seen you've responded to the question. And then Nazra, you could perhaps give more information if you have more once Wendy responds. Thanks.
Thank you, Grace. I may not be the best place to answer this because this should ideally come from legal, but I'm aware of the Finance Act that is offering a tax incentive for companies that are in carbon market, in the carbon market, or exchanges participating in emission trading. I know this because we recently signed an MOU with NIFCA. So that's my contribution towards that question. But again, I think we're open to anyone else who might want to chime in.
And thanks a lot, Nazra.
Thank you so much for the question. So I will approach it more generally. So there are three ways ESG reporting can enhance transparency and also affect how tax disclosures are viewed. First, by undertaking ESG from a reporting perspective, it increases the scope of reporting or widens the scope of reporting to non-financial material factors such as carbon emissions that Wendy touched on. And also, it also looks at workplace or racial and gender diversity. So from the surface, you might think, well, what does that have to do with tax? But these non-financial factors and the disclosures that are non-financial in nature have in themselves tax implications. So by reporting on a wider basis, then you enhance transparency, and where there are steps taken in to reduce carbon emissions, you might have now the basis of having a conversation to get either some sort of waiver or a basis for any reduction or credits from that perspective. The second is that ESG reporting emphasizes the link between governance and transparency, which is the foundation of trust. And so this opens up a wider base for you to have conversations with your investors. And third, an ESG-based approach to tax reporting is, it's more than just publishing data. It also then helps you have a tax strategy. And you have a narrative surrounding that tax strategy, which is aligned with the company's overall goals and values, which might mean then that you know how much of your budget is catered to CSR and social activities or environmentally environmental preservation activities, which then plays that conversation into how you can have discussions, for example, with KRA or investors, on how that can then help you with your tax reporting as well. And then in terms of how ESG has a benefit, again, when we look at, for example, a tax risk appetite, it just goes down to increasing transparency and accountability, especially when it comes to an investor who's looking at you from a risk perspective. Are you compliant? Are you potentially a target for the taxman to pursue? And then it also helps investors and also the business itself improve on decision-making with respect to risk mitigation, performance management. What risk can you allocate or transfer to third parties? And then it also builds on awareness. From the perspective that you have these risks within your organization, what can be mitigated, what can be transferred, what can be aligned with the company's activities in a way that can allow the company get some sort of waivers, or potentially have conversations with the taxman to help the company or boost the company. And then by reporting, by blending tax and ESG, then you can also have separately a tax risk appetite statement, which can then form part of a larger governance framework that the company is submitting to its investors, which helps, because by showing your investors that you are well aware and managing your risks, then you can position yourself for more opportunities. I think for me, that's it. That's all for now.
Thank you so much for that. So we're coming to the end of the session.
Perhaps I can chime in there, Grace, quickly in terms of taxation. And for me, I think I'll just speak to the issue of FDI. I think our country does, need to adopt favorable taxation and fiscal frameworks to encourage more FDI into the country, especially for manufacturing, which I know is a pillar for this economy. So a sustainable, a predictable, a pragmatic taxation approach, and embedding ESG into that, I think, will go a long way into attracting FDI from multinationals who have offices either in Kenya, in Africa, to drive innovation, digitization, and that sort of thing.
Thank you very much for your input, Mimi. So we're coming to a close of this session. So I'm welcoming all our panelists just to give us their parting shots. So starting with Nasra, then Sarah, Wendy, then Mary Ngechu will close for us.
Thank you so much. First, I'd like to say thank you to the attendees for being part of this session. I'd also like to thank the panelists for sharing and contributing their views. And also I'd like to thank CAN for bringing us all together to discuss this very pertinent topic, which is only going to get more important to investors and will greatly affect how we move and conduct our businesses going forward. As a Kenya Green Building Society, we invite you to know more about us. We're excited to work with CAN and are open to working with all of you in driving the ESG agenda forward. Thank you so much for your time once again. It was my pleasure to be part of this panel session. I definitely learned a lot, and I was really happy to have such an engaged audience. Thank you, Sana.
Thank you very much. Sarah?
Thank you so much very much to all the attendees, and I've learned a lot as well. I hope you've been able to learn something from me as well. And what I would encourage is all of us to work together in this space, and especially when it comes to the waste management space. As Mary Ngechu highlighted on the new waste management, the Sustainable Waste Management Act, and very soon hoping to have the EPR regulations enacted by next year or by end of this year. We'll be working more and more together. Feel free to reach out to us and through CAM on how to help your businesses to be able to manage your plastic waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can have Mimi, then Wendy thereafter.
Great. I think just like everyone else, I have really learned something new. You know, we had speakers from the built environment, from the plastics specialists, so definitely some you know, valuable insights there. Thank you, Cam, once again. Thank you to everyone who logged in today. I think this was very valuable, and it's important that we continue the conversations, keep collaborating, and at the end of the day, remember you can actually participate in this whole ESG journey from an individual point of view, right from your home, your car, your workplace. And I think then we'll be able to have a sustainable business environment.
Thank you so much. Wendy?
Thank you. I'm appreciative of the opportunity to participate today. I want to encourage all the companies that are thinking of doing ESG reporting that, you know, just start. It starts by just saying you want to start doing a report, and slowly you're able to come up with an ESG report. And ESG reporting is about talking about your good, your bad, and your ugly. So don't just report on all the good things. Ensure your report is very objective. Thank you, Cam, for this opportunity, and have a good day.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Grace. Now I changed my environment, so you allow me to switch off my camera. And mine is to thank everyone for logging in today. Thank you for our panelists for such informative information that we have had. As women in manufacturing, we are going to be reaching out for partnerships so that we can be able to simply not just have conversation, but come up with solutions for the women who are part of our program. So NSC, we'll be approaching you as WIM so that we're able to partner and come up with tools that we can be able to share with our women in manufacturing, global compact, so that we're able to help them start the journey of including ESG as one of the practice for the enterprises. Thank you, Grace and KEM team, for organizing this. I think it was one of our best webinar that we've had. Let's look forward for the next that we're going to be having. And also maybe looking forward that we have an activity as WIM before the end of the year, a physical, so that we can also be able to meet with each other and network. Thank you, and back to you, Grace.
Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. So we've come to the end of the session, and we'll be sharing the video to these webinars. So Asanteni Sana from the CAM team, have a lovely day. Thank you.